ahead and get started. It's 5 minutes till 1, so we can go ahead and get started for the afternoon. I'm going to switch gears to talk about disciplinary cases. For those of you who are at presbyteries, you're much more likely to get a disciplinary case. A disciplinary case that is filed with the stated clerk of your presbytery is most likely going to be against one of the members of your presbytery, so one of the teaching elders, or a ruling elder that's been commissioned to a particular pastoral service, or it's possible that your presbytery may have taken original jurisdiction of a particular session for one of the disciplinary allegations that they may be working with. So it's possible that you might have a disciplinary case that has come from a session that is around the behavior of a member of a particular congregation. So let's talk about the disciplinary process. The disciplinary process is a bit different than the remedial. So we know that a remedial case begins when someone who is standing files a complaint. The difference between a disciplinary case or a remedial case and a disciplinary case is that a disciplinary case begins when a committee that has already been appointed by the council, by the presbytery or the session, the committee has done an investigation of a person, and that committee decides, yes, we believe there's probable cause that this person committed an offense, and we can reasonably prove it. And if we file charges, we have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt to 2/3 of the members of the PJC. So when that committee files charges, that begins a disciplinary case. Now, how does that committee get appointed? That's generally the first part, what people think of as a disciplinary case, but it really isn't. It's a procedure preliminary to a disciplinary case. Excuse me. Essentially, a council of membership gets notice that one of its members may have committed an offense. And an offense is broadly defined as action contrary to Scripture or to the PCUSA Constitution. It's very broad. It could be anyone's actions, probably on any given day or week. I usually like to say if you get a notice that someone has committed an offense, really the question is this something that should be corrected by the council? We need to make sure that that person's behavior does not continue in the future. Does this need to be corrected to make sure that behavior does not continue in the future? Okay. The rules of discipline tell us that if that notice is in writing from a member of the Presbyterian Church and that written notice is filed with the stated clerk, then there is zero discretion on the part of the stated clerk. It automatically triggers a standing rule that every presbytery has about how this committee is appointed. This committee is called an investigating committee because that's what it does, is it is going to investigate these allegations that an individual member of the council has committed an offense. I'm using presbytery, but this process also is exactly a mirror process to it at the session level. So if a clerk of session receives an allegation that one of the members of the congregation has committed an offense, the session must appoint an investigating committee, a committee that we call an investigating committee. The committee is called an investigating committee because that's what they do. Chapter 10 is the chapter that talks about the process of an investigating committee, talks about what an investigating committee is supposed to do. The first thing that they do, because there's no evaluation of that written allegation on the part of the stated clerk, when they receive that written allegation from a member of the Presbyterian Church, that automatically triggers the standing rule for the appointment of the investigating committee. The first thing that an investigating committee has to do is look at that written allegation and says, does this rise to the level of an offense? Is this an allegation that would be an offense? So if they have it in writing that Pastor Smith laughed at me as she passed me along the road, even if they had a couple of witnesses, that probably doesn't rise to the level of an offense. An investigating committee would say, even if we can prove that this was true and everything is true, this doesn't rise to the level of offense. They would close their investigation and they would let the presbytery know that no charges are filed. Now let me say, for those of you who are stated clerks and for everybody, when an investigating committee is appointed, the presbytery is told that an allegation has been received against one of the members, and that's all. And that an investigating committee has been appointed. That's all. They are not told who is being investigated, what the nature of the offense is. All of that is presumed to be confidential while the investigating committee is working. So the investigating committee, its own work, and who it's investigating and what the nature of the offense is, that is all presumed to be confidential. If an investigating committee decides, yes, we are going to file charges, at that point, any trial is actually presumed to be open to the public, so that presumption of confidentiality is no longer in play. Once charges are filed, that presumption of confidentiality, there's no longer presumption of confidentiality. That doesn't mean your presbytery is required to publish the fact that charges have been filed, but it's not confidential anymore, and the trial itself is presumed to be open. It is possible that the parties can request that the trial is closed. The PJC may close a disciplinary trial with a 2/3 vote. It's one of the only 2/3 votes in our process. They can do that, and they have to have a reason to do that, and so they have to write the reason out if they choose so. But the presumption is that the disciplinary trials are open. Okay, let's go back to the notice. What if the notice is not in writing, or if it is in writing, it's from a non-Presbyterian? Then all of a sudden we have a little bit more discretion. And at that point, the rules say if someone who is a leader in the council receives information that someone may have committed an offense, that person may put it into writing and give that to the stated clerk. That will then trigger the appointment of the investigating committee. We asked the assembly 7 or 8 years ago, what is the standard for this? You know, how, if someone who's a leader receives information, do they have to put that into writing and give it to the stated clerk? And the assembly, not very helpfully, said, well, yeah, if a leader hears about an offense, the leader should put it into writing and give it to the stated clerk. There's still no evaluation as to who evaluates what is an offense, when does it have to go into writing and given to the stated clerk. So at that point, there's a little bit more discretion involved. Let me tell you that you all are sitting in the epicenter of the areas where the secular world has told us if the allegation is child abuse, we have to start our processes. So if it's a serious enough allegation that it's something like child abuse, it doesn't matter who's receiving that information. You don't do any investigation. You put that into writing, give that to the stated clerk, and then the investigating committee is what our process is we always do things by committees, not by individuals, and the investigating committee will investigate that probable cause. Mm-hmm. We are, yes. So, state, you have a bunch of mandated reporters. You guys can talk about that, because I know that Pennsylvania is one of the strongest. Yeah. But under our book of order, also the teaching elder and the ruling elders are mandated to report. And under our book of order, you're mandated to report not only to the secular authorities under whatever process the secular world has set out, but also ecclesiastical authorities. So to the state clerk. Yeah, Jenny.
This is a question I've never seen referred to, but I was thinking it's standing and membership.
So,
Does she or he have standing?
right, not necessarily for standing to, that automatically triggers the appointment of the investigating committee, but again, anyone who receives this notice can put it into writing for a non-member or for someone who's a baptized member, and that automatically triggers. And I highly recommend that you go ahead and do it. Now, there are gray areas, right? What if the allegation is teaching elder Smith is single and had sex with ruling elder Jones in the congregation, right? We know they're dating, and right, it does happen once in a while, right? So it's not necessarily adultery, but it's adultery and non-marriage, right? So, where does that go? And so, and there are some, now, for quite a while, we have a General Assembly sexual misconduct policy that identifies that misuse of office and position, just like in the Book of Order, misuse of office and position is part of the definition of sexual abuse, and so that is just by definition a sexual abuse, so it should be placed into writing and an investigating committee, because if a person is serving a congregation, they should not be having sexual contact with somebody within that congregation that they're providing pastoral care to. But there are some other gray areas that definitely you hear about rumors. If you hear a rumor, do you have to put that into writing? Do you have to do a little bit of investigation first to find out if you think this really happened? When do you put that in writing? And all that is, for those of you who are stated clerks, can give people heart attacks, because you hear a lot of things, right? And you don't know what needs to be placed into writing and what doesn't. I just want to say, if it is behavior that you're hearing about that is potentially harmful to the community, that the behavior needs to stop, that the behavior cannot continue, you should probably put that into writing and give that to your stated clerk and begin the process. Because our process is not about individuals taking care of other individuals, or by taking care of, I mean out by the woodshed. I meant it's about a group. We empower this group that we call the investigating committee to do the initial investigation. And it's about the community holding people accountable in their behavior, and not, again, punishing them for their past behavior, but making sure they don't engage in the behavior again. Okay, standing rule. Every presbytery must have a standing rule, so you need to make sure your presbytery has a standing rule for the appointment of the investigating committee. Every presbytery is slightly different about whom is empowered under your standing rule to appoint an investigating committee. Usually it includes the stated clerk, since they're the ones receiving that allegation. And they can help if the allegation is that a teaching elder has embezzled some money. They can put someone on that investigating committee that maybe knows about finances and can read a ledger sheet and a book sheet, really, really well. Or if it's something having to do with misuse of computers or technology or something like that, you might want to put someone on the investigating committee that has a background and a knowledge of computers, so was this something that the person had to affirmatively go into and get, or is it something that is automatically sent to you by people you don't know, that kind of stuff. Okay, so often it includes, if you have a presbytery leader, it often includes that person, although sometimes that person doesn't want to be on the group that's appointing an investigating committee, because that presbytery leader may be the pastoral leader of the presbytery and doesn't want to be involved at all in the discipline process. But sometimes it does include that person. Sometimes if you have a committee on ministry, it might be the moderator of the committee on ministry might also be in that group that appoints the investigating committee. Sometimes it is the moderator of the presbytery as a whole, since the moderator is usually the ones that appoints the members of your committees. So it depends from presbytery to presbytery who's under your standing rule is empowered to appoint an investigating committee. So if there are allegations of sexual abuse, and under our rules, the definition of sexual abuse is sexual conduct with a person who's under the age of 18, a sexual conduct with someone who is unable to give consent, sexual conduct that includes force or coercion, and sexual conduct that includes misuse of office or position, which is where you get your ordinary sexual harassment or sexual conduct with a person who's in a supervisory position and someone who is being supervised, or who's a member of the congregation and a leader of a congregation. That misuse of office or position is kind of a broader catch-all. If the allegation is against a teaching elder and it includes one, it's in that definition of sexual abuse, then it automatically triggers our process for determining whether that teaching elder should be placed on administrative leave. Our process for determining whether that person should be placed on administrative leave includes 2 members of the PJC. This is one of those places where 2 members of the PJC are asked to review whether or not there's a risk that this person will continue in that behavior while they are in that position. If the 2 members of the PJC believe that there is a risk, that person is placed on administrative leave. There is no automatic administrative leave in our system. A presbytery cannot unilaterally place someone on administrative leave. This is the only process by which someone may be placed on administrative leave. That being said, if you have contracts that include your terms of call, you can certainly put a different process into the terms of call. So that the 3-way call includes a different process that might include administrative leave. And we've certainly seen that. That's very common.
So,
Yeah.
with that definition of sexual abuse, if the allegation is that the senior pastor and an associate pastor, both married or having an affair, the senior pastor would be alleged to be engaged in abuse, and the more junior pastor would not. So the senior could go on administrative leave and not the junior?
Yes, or it could also be adultery.
Well, yeah, they could
Right.
both be charged with adultery, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be
Yeah.
sexual abuse.
Yeah, right.
To the associate.
For the administrative leave, right? Which is probably why it's better to put it in the terms of call as opposed to up to this process. This process is pretty cumbersome. It has to happen within a very short time, like 3 or 4 days, 3 days after the allegation is received. 2 members of the PJC review this and make a determination on administrative leave. So it's pretty quick. It's a little bit cumbersome because it's actually a hearing. Those 2 members invite the person in front of them has the allegation against them, and they make this determination on risk evaluation. It's not easy.
Can you use reserve PJC members, the ones that aren't currently sitting, to do this kind of determination?
So the question is, can you use former permanent judicial commission members? I think you can. We don't have an authoritative interpretation, but I do think you can do that. Only because if you were to use 2 current members, you would then have to go to those former members to sit on any trial, and it seems logical to me to be able to use the former members on this process so that you don't disqualify current members. We don't have an authoritative interpretation, but it does seem logical to me. That's a great question. Okay. So, once an investigating committee is appointed, that investigating committee has one job, and that's to investigate. It must determine first whether the allegation rises to the level of an offense. If it decides that the allegation does not rise to the level of offense, it can say, we are not filing charges, and it gives that to the state clerk. The state clerk tells the presbytery, they thank the investigating committee, everything is dismissed. If they determine that it does rise to the level of an offense, then they have to go and do an investigation to see if there's probable cause to believe that Pastor Smith committed the offense. If they've gotten to that point, a probable cause, they continue in their investigation, and they have to determine one of 2 possibilities. One is, if they filed charges, could they prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? Because if they file charges, they then switch. They're no longer investigating committee, but they have to prosecute those charges. And Those charges are what begins a disciplinary case in front of you all as permanent judicial commission members. And they have to prove to you, to 2/3 of the members of the PJC, to 2/3 of you on the PJC, that the person committed the offense beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a really high bar. So they really have to have gathered enough information that they can use that as evidence to prove the person committed the offense to 2/3 of the members of the PJC beyond a reasonable doubt. The investigating committee members also have 1 year in which to do this investigation. Let's see if I have that, time limit. They have 1 year to do that investigation to decide whether or not they are going to file charges. That's a hard timeline. If they file it 1 year and 1 day, those of you in Pittsburgh Presbytery may remember that happened. And the reason we all know it is because the person who was accused kept putting it on the internet. So it was, even though it was presumed to be confidential, the person who was accused was the one who kept putting all this stuff on the internet. So we all found out. The investigating committee in Pittsburgh Presbytery had investigated for 1 year and 1 day. Later, after the 1 year, they filed charges, and the PJC had to say, "We're sorry, that's beyond the 1 year." So it was one.
Miscounting of days.
It was miscounting of days. It was a hard deadline.
Meaningless days.
Yeah. So it was also, an investigating committee has 5 years from the date in which the person committed the alleged offense. So say Pastor Smith is alleged to have embezzled some money, $100,000 from the congregation she served. If the investigating committee is appointed 4.5 years after that, after she allegedly embezzled that money, that investigating committee would only have 6 months to complete its investigation and to file the charges, because it has to file charges within 5 years of the person committing the alleged offense. Now, that 5-year statute of limitations, that 5-year does not apply if it falls under that definition of sexual abuse that I just mentioned. Then there's no limitation. So it's possible that as members of the PJC, you will get an allegation, charges filed against someone that falls under that definition of sexual abuse that are 20 or 30 years old, because there's no limitation on that.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
also, when civil or I should say criminal charges are being filed, isn't there also kind of a hold?
So, yes, the question is, if there's a concurrent secular case, is there a way to extend any of these deadlines? And the answer is yes. If there is a concurrent secular case, it is possible, if the secular authorities are asking us to put our process on hold, which certainly happens, if the alleged offense, if the behavior has risen to the level of a criminal behavior in the secular world, a lot of times the secular authorities are doing their own investigation. They don't want us in the middle of messing up their investigation, or they might have already charged the person with a criminal offense, and that person doesn't want to incriminate themselves in our process. Because our process is all about repentance, right, in order to get to reconciliation. So we really require the, yes, I did it and I'm sorry. But that then might endanger someone to be punished in the secular world if it has risen to the level of a criminal offense. So if they have asked us to put ours on hold, we can actually extend that 1-year deadline that an investigating committee has. You can extend that by 6 months. Guess who is the one who decides whether or not to extend it? It's the PJC. That request will come to you all as members of the PJC with all the details as to why the request is being made, and you are allowed to extend it for 6 months. And you can keep extending it as long as you need to for an additional 6 months until the secular process has been completed. The longest I've ever seen a church case extended is 5 years. And that was in the case of an alleged child abuse, that the teaching elder had allegedly abused a child. And the secular court went up and down in the secular state 3 times, actually, to the state Supreme Court 3 times, and it was a 5-year process until that was finally completed. And when that was completed, we were able to pick up the church processes and move forward with that.
Can the prosecuting committee then use the criminal court records as part of their evidence?
Yes, they can. It makes it more difficult because, again, you have to prove to 2/3 of the members of the PJC beyond a reasonable doubt. And one of the things that happens is investigating committees, again, everybody is volunteer, and they're not necessarily investigating committees, now prosecuting committee, once the trial charges, aren't necessarily savvy. And so in this unfortunate situation, the investigating committee had charged the person with child abuse, not with violation of their ordination vows or a violation of a particular scriptural provision, but with child abuse. So then the question was, did they prove the child abuse? Well, they proved the guy was under the covers with an underage person, but they didn't prove that there was actual touching and child abuse. So it was inappropriate. Yes, they should have been removed from, there's just so much inappropriate, should have been removed from office and stuff, but they didn't prove there was touching, and so we didn't prove it, even though we used the secular court's determination. Although he was convicted in the secular court, so person's in jail. Anyway, the question is, can you use the secular information and conviction? And yes, you can. But again, you have to prove it to 2/3 of the members of the PJC. Okay, so let me talk about what are the possible censures, because I think this is important. The possible censures that that a permanent judicial commission may place around a member of the Presbyterian Church USA are all about the relationship of that person with the larger church, and especially if they're a member of a presbytery, it's really about the relationship of that teaching elder with that presbytery, and the presbytery is functioning on behalf of the PCUSA. So it is possible for the presbytery to simply rebuke someone. Teaching Elder Smith, you should not have lied to your session about where you went on vacation. Don't do it again. This just doesn't build a very good relationship, right? Don't do it again. That would be a public rebuke. It's also possible for the community to do a public rebuke and combine that with what we call a supervised rehabilitation. And that means that we as the church community will take some responsibility and try to help the person understand their behavior and how to change it, how to make sure they don't engage in that behavior again, the supervised rehabilitation. So Pastor Smith, not only should you not have lied about where you went on vacation to your session, you also shouldn't have taken that $200 discretionary fund that you had along with you. Even though you brought it back with you from vacation, we're going to send you just some financial counseling to show why you shouldn't have left it there and not taken it with you and brought it back and stuff. So we're going to send you some financial counseling. That's a supervised rehabilitation with rebuke. Don't do it again. Now, if Pastor Smith's behavior was such that we're really not sure she understood why she did it, or she clearly understood that she did it, but she didn't know enough to stop doing it, kind of thing, we can temporarily exclude somebody from ministry, from their office. That would be Pastor Smith. You took $10,000 from that church that you were entrusted in a leadership position with. We are going to temporarily exclude you from your office, and we are probably going to combine that with a supervised rehabilitation too. Only this time we're going to send you to counseling, to real counseling, to find out why you abused that trust that we had given you. Because at that point, it's not just about financial mismanagement, right? It's about some deeper level thing of why that pastor abused that trust that they were placed in. And again, the worst thing that we can do for somebody is remove someone from the membership of the PCUSA. Pastor Smith, you abused not one, but 2 or 3 children within the community that you were serving. You have stated that you're not going to stop doing that, and so we are going to remove you from membership in the Presbyterian Church. Your behavior is too dangerous for those of us to be around. That's extraordinarily rare. We very, very rarely remove someone from membership, and I've actually never seen it at a presbytery level. I have seen it at a congregational level where a member of the congregation is just being so disruptive, they finally go as far as removing someone from membership. And they're thinking more of that congregation. They're not thinking of the larger PCUSA, but it ends up being the larger PCUSA that they remove from membership. Yeah.
On temporary exclusion, be very specific about the exclusion. Don't say at least 4 years.
Right. So it is possible to temporarily exclude someone for a term of years. That's not very helpful because we don't know in that term of years if they've actually repented and are not going to engage in that behavior again, right? You can't tell just because of a passage of time. So it's really more helpful to combine that with the supervised rehabilitation and then maybe list out some of the behaviors you would like to see in order to prove that the person is not going to engage in that past behavior again in the future. So that combination is really that's the most that's the most common type of censure that we see, mostly because behavior that would result in just a simple rebuke doesn't usually go to judicial process. Mm-hmm.
What Wayne said is absolutely true, but you've got to have both in there because I participated with a gentleman who was told to go to supervised rehabilitation and he was excluded for 2 years, but they forgot to put and the expectation is that you will have repented and he came back and petitioned successfully to be reinstated without having repented.
So that's the odd thing. I mean, not odd, but I mean, it is written into our censures how someone can be restored. And they can even be restored early if they've gotten to the point of repentance. The community gets to decide. So it's possible the community would decide, okay, you were excluded for 4 years with supervised rehabilitation, but we're convinced that you're not going to engage in this again, that you're repentant, and we're going to restore you after 2 years. Or, as Jenny said, they might just restore them without that. But it's up to the community to make that decision. So there's always that possibility for restoration. Okay, that's a great transition into what happens if someone affirmatively renounces. A renunciation means that someone affirmatively says, I am no longer a member of the Presbyterian Church USA, as opposed to being removed through this judicial process. They come to us and they say, I no longer want to be a member of the Presbyterian Church USA. Especially if they're a teaching elder, this has serious consequences. It means that they are no longer a member of the PCUSA. But it also means that if they want to return as a member of the PCUSA, they can do so. They can join a congregation, but they cannot do so as a teaching elder. If they want to be a teaching elder again after having renounced jurisdiction, they would have to join a congregation and they would have to go through inquiry and candidacy and all the processes through for ordination again. So they would, obviously, any Presbyterian council that was taking them through that process would also have to be clear that they're not engaging in that behavior that they were involved in prior to the renunciation. There is a current provision in the Book of Order that if anyone renounces jurisdiction while in judicial process, either investigation or in the midst of trial, they may not be employed and they may not volunteer with a congregation or anyone, I guess, in the by council in the Presbyterian Church USA. There are 2 or 3 overtures to amend that current provision because of the question of whether or not this can be enforced? What are the long-term consequences of it? Should it be, there are a number of questions in there. So anyway, this General Assembly, and then if this General Assembly passes one of those, it'll be your presbyteries will also wrestle with that interpretation or potential change. Yeah, sorry.
Whose responsibility would it be if somebody had renounced jurisdiction and then was going through this whole ordination process again, to find out if he had renounced at one time in the past?
Great question. So every council that is working with a candidate, inquirer to begin with, and then candidate, really should do those background checks. Just as any council that's going to be doing any hiring, and or use anyone as a volunteer, especially if the volunteer is going to be around children. There should always be background checks, and there should always be reference checks. And in the church, especially, you can be very honest about the references that you give, especially folks who are teaching elders. But it is the responsibility of the council of membership, especially the second one, because the first council of membership may not have any indication that they've then joined another presbytery or another congregation somewhere across the country. Great question.
A couple statements about implications of removing from office or renunciation. If it's a teaching elder, they do not lose their pension. They are vested, they keep it. However, when they retire, or if they're retired and they remove or they renounce jurisdiction, they can no longer claim their pension as a housing allowance. So that it does have tax liability.
It would make sense because they're not functioning as a teaching elder. We don't consider them a teaching elder any longer. Yeah.
For those here who are not stated clerks, there is a denominational database maintained by Chris Valerius called eMinister, and that lists all the individuals. It was started about 1998, where it really begins, and it lists the changes in each minister's status. You were pastor in Monmouth, now you're pastor in Huntington, whatever. And if you are a stated clerk, you can look at that and see that, oh, that person used to, in fact, be a Presbyterian, and then they renounced jurisdiction, and now they're applying, what was it, teaching elder from the EPC or wherever.
Yeah, the database is limited. It just says what the status is at a particular time. And if someone is removed from office, it doesn't say why. So, that kind of detail is not in there, but it does say if someone has been removed from office.
A hint.
Yeah. And then you can go ask the presbytery of membership, the presbytery that had removed them from membership. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a disciplinary case. All that I've been talking about right now leads you up to a disciplinary case. A disciplinary case begins when that investigating committee that we've been talking about files charges against an individual. They believe that Pastor Smith did embezzle that $10,000. Pastor Smith has a right to, first of all, to be silent. Pastor Smith does not have to testify on her behalf, does not have to meet with the investigating committee, does not have to testify in front of the PJC. Pastor Smith also has a right to counsel at this point, which means if Pastor Smith cannot afford counsel, you, as the members of the PJC, will appoint counsel for her. Pastor Smith, that's the main thing. When charges are filed against Pastor Smith, the investigating committee now morphs into a new procedure, and instead of investigating, it's going to prosecute those charges against Pastor Smith. They now have a new name to follow that, and that's a prosecuting committee. So if you hear about a prosecuting committee, it's the same thing as it was an investigating committee. Now it's a prosecuting committee. The parties are going to be the prosecuting committee on behalf of the presbytery. So it's really going to be the presbytery versus the person who's accused. Those are the two parties. There is a requirement, once disciplinary charges are filed, that your moderator and clerk will hold a pretrial conference within 30 days with the person who's accused and the prosecuting committee, or at least one representative of the prosecuting committee. The reason for this pretrial conference is really for the benefit of the accused, but also so the PJC can make sure that the accused has copies of the charges, that the accused has counsel. It's this point at which the accused can say, I can't afford counsel. And so the PJC can either hold a hearing to make sure that they can't afford counsel or appoints counsel. If you're on the PJC and you're going to appoint counsel, remember what Jenny had said before about the unlimited funds. Make sure there's a limit about who you're appointing and how much that's going to cost. You don't have to appoint someone who charges $400 an hour and is going to spend 2,000 hours, for instance. That doesn't have to happen. You can limit the cost of that counsel. It's a 30-day deadline, but that's not what I call a hard deadline. You all need to, especially the moderator and clerk of the PJC, have to make sure that this pretrial conference happens as early as possible within 30 days. But if for some reason the accused is not making themselves available within that 30 days, that doesn't automatically mean the case is dropped, right? That doesn't automatically mean there are no charges and the case is dropped because the accused can't make it within 30 days. And so this deadline can be extended, especially if the accused is not making themselves available or if they can't be there within that 30 days, if they're out of the country or whatever. You want to make sure you do this as soon as possible. If it stretches beyond 3 months, then the accused is probably just doing some delaying tactics, right? And you just schedule one, and if they don't show up, you can schedule a second one, make sure that counsel's appointed, and then go ahead and schedule the trial. The rules say if someone who's accused does not show up at a trial, you have to give them a second chance. So you reschedule the trial a second time, and if they don't show up a second time, you can move forward without them as long as you appoint counsel there to represent that person. So it is possible to move forward without that person participating, and we've had some situations where we've had to do that. At the pretrial conference, the other thing that happens is that's the point at which the prosecuting committee says, this is what we're going to use to prove that the person committed this offense. We're going to produce these documents, and we'll want to admit them as evidence, and these witnesses we're going to bring, and it gives they have to give the name and address of the witnesses. They don't have to show that documentation until this time, and even at this time, they just have to put a list of it to say this is what they're going to use. That at least allows the person who's accused notice about what's going to be used against them so they can prepare a defense. The accused always has a right to a trial to defend themselves, to say, I didn't do this. Of course, our process is always about repentance, so we really like it when they say, yes, I did do this, and I am repentant of it, and what I'm really concerned about is what is the most appropriate censure. It is possible that they might plead guilty to the charges. If they plead guilty to the charges, you can move straight into what we call a censure hearing. And then the facts before you are not going to be, did Pastor Smith do this or not do this? The issue will be, what is the appropriate censure that should be placed around Pastor Smith to make sure she doesn't engage in that behavior again. And that information is going to be very, very different. You might get information at that point that this is repetitive behavior, or you might get information at that point that she's already been in counseling for 6 months and she's very repentant, and you're just not going to need that much of supervised rehabilitation. So there's all kinds of things that can come out at a censure hearing about what is the appropriate censure. If you have a censure hearing and there is someone who is claimed to be harmed by the behavior, by the offense, for instance, if it was sexual misconduct and somebody's claiming that they were harmed by that behavior, that they were a victim of that behavior, you have to let that person give their victim impact statement, their statement of harm, and that is not cross-examinable by the parties. It's just a statement of harm from the person who's been harmed. Yeah.
The pretrial conference, 30 days, I'm looking at D,
Mhm.
3.0310, I'm not seeing the 30 days, is there another citation for that?
Yes, it's in D11, no, D10. D7 is under remedial process. Mhm.
What if the investigating committee, in investigating, and let's say they talk to the accused person who says, yes, I did it, and I regret it.
Great question, thank you, because that brings a third option that an investigating committee can do, and I completely skipped over it and I forgot, so thank you. So for asking that question. So an investigating committee has three options. It can either decide no charges, or it can begin what we call an alternate form of resolution. And that is a different way of resolving the issue of whether Pastor Smith committed the offense and what is the appropriate censure, different than filing charges and moving forward into a formal trial. It's an alternate form of resolution. It can include negotiation. It can include mediation. If it's mediation, it has to be with a professional mediator, that it's between the person who's accused and the investigating committee. The investigating committee could, if it wanted to, bring in someone who's been harmed, but does not have to include someone who's been harmed. It also, the rules say that we can use arbitration. I've never seen arbitration used because in the secular world, binding arbitration means a third party comes in and makes a decision that binds the two entities that are there. And in our process, the only group that can bind the parties is the PJC. You can't bring someone in from the outside to bind them. So even whatever the outcome of this alternative form of resolution is, it's usually in writing. It's called an agreement. It's a settlement agreement, however they got to it. If there is a settlement agreement between the person who's accused and the investigating committee, that agreement must go to you all as members of the PJC. It must be given to you as members of the PJC along with what the charges would be. So you have a case, you have a proposed resolution, and you either approve that agreement or you disapprove it. You cannot modify that agreement. If you are disapproving it for a reason, you see something in there that you cannot agree with, you can give that reason to the investigating committee and they can go back and rework through the alternate form of resolution that agreement, or they can move forward into the trial. The person who's accused always has a right to trial. That's why you can't modify it, because they always have a right to trial. Except unless they've agreed, right? One of the things that happens is you will notice at the end, when you all make a decision in a disciplinary case, your decision, whether it's the person is guilty or not guilty, or if they are guilty and it includes one of the 4 censures, that decision is read at the council. So at the presbytery level, it is read word for word at the presbytery meeting, and then it is placed on the presbytery minutes. If you have an alternate form of resolution that has been approved by your PJC, let me back up. The decision that you make in a disciplinary case must be made by 2/3 vote. You've heard me say that. It's really the only decision other than to close it that has to be done by 2/3 vote. The only other decision by 2/3 vote is whether to approve a disciplinary alternate form of resolution agreement. If you're going to approve that agreement, it has to be done by a 2/3 vote, just like a decision in a disciplinary case would be. So you're going to approve it by a 2/3 vote, and under the D10-0202, it states that at least a summary of that alternate form of resolution must be read to the presbytery. That summary must include the name of the person, the nature of the offense, and the nature of the censure. So even if you approve a 20-page alternate form of resolution agreement, at least a paragraph that includes the name of the accused, nature of the censure, the nature of the offense and the nature of the censure. That will be read at presbytery, and then the agreement will be placed on the minutes. Okay, so let's go back to that pretrial conference, because John, you picked up on something that I didn't mention in the remedial case. The pretrial conference is a place in the disciplinary process. Really, it's a place where you as a PJC, you're making sure that person who's accused knows what they're accused of, they know they have counsel, or they're appointed counsel, they're preparing their defense, right? So they're going to have a fair trial on these charges. It is also a place where you can ask the investigating committee, now prosecuting committee, and the person who's accused, did you all try alternate form of resolution? Is this still a possibility? You can't force them to it, but you can ask them that, is this still a possibility? They might say no, if either one of them says no, that's fine. And then you would set out a time to move forward into trial. In a remedial process, and I really didn't get into this, once a case is filed, once a case is filed in a remedial case and the case has been accepted, you can immediately schedule a trial on the merits for that case. Or you can do a pretrial conference. The pretrial conference in a remedial case is not required, but it can be extremely helpful because you can do all kinds of procedural things in a remedial case that may help you even resolve the remedial case in a pretrial conference. Because what happens in a remedial case? That's what we talked about before lunch, before we were all sleepy and taking a nap, right? What happens in a remedial case? You've got somebody really upset at what that counsel has done. A lot of times, they are just wanting to be heard, right? They're really upset at their counsel or their session or whatever, and maybe they've listed 20 years of upsetness, even though only the last 90 days is going to be valid for the trial. At a pretrial conference, you can let that person talk and rant and tell why they're upset. And the committee of counsel from that session can also respond as best as they can. And as long as there isn't a dispute of fact, this is a great time where you can let the parties talk it out. You can also help facilitate them settling resolving a particular issue. In a remedial case, if you have a complainant that's listed 12 issues, you can determine in a pretrial conference, well, they're really not concerned about 11 of the issues, but they're really concerned about that 12th issue. And that 12th issue is where the facts are in dispute. So we're all in agreement on what happened on the 11 issues. We're only going to have a trial on that 12th issue. So you can really narrow the issues down. A lot of things can happen in that pretrial conference in a remedial case. So even though it's not required, I highly recommend you do it. It basically means that 2 members of the PJC will facilitate a meeting between those 2 members of PJC and the complainant or representative of the complainant and the counsel, the respondent, and a representative of the respondent. And with both the parties there, 2 members of the PJC, you can facilitate that pretrial conference. A lot of times you can resolve most if not all of the issues at that time. You can have multiple pretrial conferences if necessary. You can also determine, are you all available on April 15th? That's when we're available to have the trial. So you can do some practical things like that too.
If you have 2 members of the PJC in the pretrial conference, do they need to use themselves about the trial?
No, they don't. Because those 2 members are not going to resolve any dispute of facts. So if either the parties are saying facts are A, no facts are B, those 2 people will say, okay, that sounds like that issue we're going to have to take to trial, right? Those 2 people are not empowered to resolve anything like that. Yeah. Okay. There is a difference between a resolution of a disciplinary case and a resolution of a remedial case. In a disciplinary case that we've just talked about, after there's a trial, you let the prosecuting committee put forward their case. You let the accused put forward their defense. They get to, if they have witnesses, they get to have direct examination and cross-examination of the witnesses. You, as members of the PJC, get to ask questions of any of the witnesses and also any of the parties. You thank the parties for being there. You ask them to wait for you while you go and deliberate in the disciplinary case. They may not have to wait in the room or anything, but you tell them to be on call, essentially. And after your deliberation, you will ask the parties to come back into the room with you, and you will tell them what your decision is. Yes, you found the person guilty of the particular offense, and this is the appropriate censure. Or, yes, you found the person guilty of the offense, and you would like to move into a censure hearing. Are they able to do a censure hearing now? If not, when? You know, you schedule one as quick as possible.
What are the rules of evidence that are normally used in a secular case ever come into play?
Okay, so question was about rules of evidence. Do the rules of evidence that are ever used in the secular world ever come into play? Let me preface that by saying we have almost no rules of evidence. If you look in our Book of Order, there's one chapter that's entitled Rules of Evidence. And it's about 2.5 pages. Only about 1 page are actually rules of evidence. The other 1.5 are not. The rules that we have are extremely limited. For a long time, the PJC had immense discretion as to what kind of information they would admit as evidence. We finally had a case about 10 or 12 years ago. It was a disciplinary case, and we had, let's see, how did this work? An investigating committee got overly zealous and broke into somebody's office. Broke in and entered and took some files.
Wasn't Watergate.
Sounds like Watergate, right? We all know that these files cannot be used. But they filed charges, and they wanted to use these files as evidence against the person. And the PJC accepted the files, saying, well, we don't have any rules, right? We can even admit hearsay. I mean, we don't have any rules. So they admitted that those files that were taken as a result of breaking and entering and stealing. And the person was found guilty, and the person appealed. And at the General Assembly Permanent Judicial Commission, the General Assembly Permanent Judicial Commission said, yeah, you're right, we don't have any rules, but you really shouldn't have accepted something that would have been illegally obtained in the secular world. So we at least know that that's the outer boundary of what is acceptable. If it was illegally obtained in the secular world, you really shouldn't accept that in the church world. That being said, most of the secular rules do not apply. Some make sense to apply if you know about some rules that you think that make sense. For instance, it makes sense to tell someone if they have multiple witnesses that the multiple witnesses are not going to be in the same room listening to the other witnesses testify prior to their testimony, right? They should be off in a different room. So that makes sense, even though we don't have that written out. So there are some things that you can certainly use and to bring in. But realize that this is, again, it's not about punishing someone. It's about getting to reconciliation and restoration is really, yeah.
I would just comment
Yeah.
that probably hearsay rules came about because they thought the evidence was so tainted it wasn't useful, and it would bias people in the end. So I suppose it's up to each committee to decide if it's so egregious that it won't.
That's exactly right. So the question, the statement was that in the secular world, a hearsay rule is because a piece of information may be so beyond the so circumstantial, I guess, that it's not, it doesn't have any probative value, doesn't have any truthfulness, helpfulness. Whereas in our system, it's up to you as the PJC to make that determination. You can let any information you want in as evidence, but then you have to weigh that, and that's really your burden as members of PJC is to weigh that information. And if you have the church secretary coming in and talking about the rumors that she overheard or he overheard in the parking lot, that may not be very persuasive to you, as opposed to somebody who's saying directly what they experienced. That will be a lot more persuasive, right? Okay. So it's 5 minutes till 2. Let's take a short break. It's probably time to take a break, and then we'll come back and do some case studies and probably wrap it up. So. Well, I would actually like to talk to the Synod PJC people for a little bit longer. Oh, time for the break? Let's do 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so we'll talk about that when I get back.
I guess you have to call a meeting.
Yeah.
What threw me on the question is they only reference the
I know.
remedial, when it really ought to have two
Yeah.
references.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I agree.
Something to point out and fix.
A case study to get started on the discipline side, the discipline part. And you're going to pretend that you're on a Presbytery PJC. So for those of you on the Synod, just pretend you're on the Presbytery PJC again. So you have been given notice that an investigating committee, IC, there's all kinds of acronyms, right? Is beginning AFR, which means, excuse me, I know there was something tickling me, is beginning alternate form of resolution. You don't know what the situation is, but you are preparing to receive a possible alternate form of resolution agreement or charges. So what do you do?
Call the other members to see when they're available.
Right, I heard wait, absolutely. Call the other members, see when you're gonna be available. Yeah, clear your schedule, you know you're gonna get something. So, you're gonna gather when you get something, but right now, you don't have to do anything. The reason you've been given notice is that there was an old provision in the Book of Order that allowed you to extend the 1-year deadline while they are working through alternate form of resolution. That provision was taken out, but the other provision that went with it, that they had to notify you that they began AFR, is still in there. So it's really kind of stuck in there for no reason. So they notify you, you don't have to do anything, just know you're either gonna get charges or an agreement, probably. That's right, start to pray, there you go.
Rules of discipline over again.
Right, oh, you're right, okay, you can review the rules of discipline, right. Okay, now, you have been called in to receive charges and an alternate form of resolution agreement. In reading the charges, you realize the accused is a person whom you have known for 20 years in a professional capacity. Do you recuse yourself? We'll just stop there. Heard a yes? Not necessarily, a maybe. How do you know? What kind of a professional capacity?
I delight in knowing the person for 20 years.
There you go, you know the person for 20 years, so
Might
you
give up on them.
might or might not. Okay, so it depends, right? How have you known this person? What kind of a professional capacity?
If you're immovably convinced the person is a liar, you have to recuse yourself.
Right, okay, that's perfect. If you're immovably convinced one way or the other, the person is a liar or they're a saint, whatever, you probably do need to recuse yourself if you're not willing to be neutral and listen to the charges.
But if you've both been in presbytery for 20 years,
Right.
you know them, but
You know them? That doesn't automatically mean you have to recuse yourself. That's right. Okay, you decide to remain on the PJC. So you open the agreement and you begin to read. You realize the accused minister has agreed that she was in an adulterous affair with the church treasurer. You know that the minister has had adulterous affairs before. The minister member is agreeing to temporary removal from office for 2 years and counseling. There is a confidentiality clause in the agreement and an agreement that the files will be sealed when she is reinstated to office in 2 years. Do you approve the agreement? I'm hearing lots of no's, one yes, one bunch of no's, okay? Tell me why you might.
I might approve because who am I to assume that the investigating committee, prosecuting committee also does not have that information?
Huh?
It still came to this.
Came to that conclusion, okay? Why would you not?
no, because I'm speaking, because your stated clerk has to certify on every person who's transferred from presbytery to presbytery that this person has never been convicted of sexual misconduct, and if there is a sealed agreement, I don't know whether that would involve sexual conduct or not, so therefore I cannot ever check the box on that person, and they're never gonna get another job in another trust.
So that statement has never been convicted or is not currently under charge?
Never.
There's actually a self-statement, and then there's a statement that the state clerk does. So there's two different statements, so you might be thinking of the self one. Yeah. Mhm.
If I knew as much as you say I did, I should have confused myself.
Okay, so let's parse this out. Let's go to the knowledge thing. You know that she has committed adulterous affairs. Well, I mean, you didn't know who it was before. You just
Well, that's right.
right, but now you know who it is. So let's get to she had.
How could
Oops.
you recruit yourself if you didn't know who it was?
Yeah, I know. Right, yeah. Just, that's a good point. So, but you know about the affairs. Were you a participant in the affairs? Is that how you know? Is this a rumor that you heard in the parking lot? Is that how you know? Is this something that was, in the minutes because there was a previous, decision that everybody knows, and so it was all, part of the question I do want you to think through is how do you know, and to question what you know, right? Obviously, if you were a participant, you probably do need to recuse yourself, but.
All right, if you're a pastor and they tell you as a pastor, and then maybe this turns up, and you do what you were told confidentially previously.
Okay, and that's a good question. That actually brings up the confidentiality requirements, and I'm glad that you brought those up, because it goes hand in hand with the earlier question about the mandatory reporting. For teaching elders, if you receive any information that you receive in the context of pastoral care, you must keep that information confidential. You may share that information if the person gives you permission, and you must report it if it is child abuse, which is under the age of 18.
I have a question.
So, yeah.
All right, in this article statement, that you must keep it confidential.
Yes.
Says who?
The Book of Order.
Book of Order.
Yeah. If you received it in the context of pastoral care. Yeah.
And that stands up legally in court too?
In our court, our system, yes. Yes.
Sexual abuse, not just of children, but of anybody that an office was.
Thank you, yes, sexual abuse. Right. The mandatory.
Pastor was.
Yeah, so it's important to look at that provision, see what is mandated to be confidential, what may be shared, and then what must be reported. So, yeah,
Follow-up question.
yeah.
So if on pastoral care, you receive information that this person murdered somebody and is confessing. All right, now it's pretty serious, but
Yeah.
do you keep your mouth shut or do you tell?
Yeah. That's a great question, because the requirements for mandated reporting have to do if there is future harm, if you believe there's future harm. So if you believe this person is still going to harm
So again,
people,
It's the pastor's.
correct. It's a reasonable belief.
G40301.
I'm gonna go to G.
G40301.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's not easy. There's a lot of, we could probably talk about that for several hours, right?
You have this one as the church treasurer. It's gonna matter for what the offense is, whether the church treasurer is a volunteer or a paid employee. Because the pastor's supervising if you're a paid employee.
Well, actually, it's a broad
No, so
definition, of misuse of office or position, so it'd probably still be under that sexual abuse. Okay, let's talk about the confidentiality clause piece. This is an AFR, and under the requirements, the rules, if you approve the AFR, it must be placed on the minutes, and at least a summary of the person who is accused, the nature of the offense, and the nature of the censure must be summarized and read at the presbytery. So it's not actually possible for it to be confidential, because that, you can't agree to something that's unconstitutional, that's out of that constitutional requirement. So that would be a reason that you would say, we are not going to accept this because of this provision, and it's contrary to this provision that has to happen in the Book of Order. And then you would let the investigating committee and the accused decide, are they going to strike that, or are they going to move forward to a trial on the charges filed? Okay, very good. Okay, the PJC disapproves the agreement and suggests that the confidentiality clause be taken out. The prosecuting committee prepares for trial. Unfortunately, they list no witnesses because the main witnesses refuse to testify. They want to introduce telephone tapes made by an aggrieved spouse and copies of emails from a personal email account. The defense has filed a motion asking to exclude all that evidence on the basis of privacy and that it was illegally obtained. What do you do? Yeah, so you could.
Or you know if it's obtained illegally or not.
the question is, can you hold a hearing on that evidence? And you would have to do that in the context of the trial. So you could do that straight up front, have a hearing on whether that evidence was illegally obtained, whether it should be excluded, and whether you feel like it should be excluded. Yeah.
Maybe see a difference between the two, that you can't force a spouse to testify, but they may if they want to. So if the spouse made the recordings and it was in a relationship, those are acceptable. But we don't know where the emails came from. But if the spouse had access and he or she gave them, yes, but if they were stolen or hacked, that's a different issue.
Yeah. So this is kind of a trick question because it depends on what state you're in. If you're in Florida, it's illegal to tape someone's conversations without their approval, right, and then use that in secular court. I don't know what that's like in Pennsylvania, but it might be, or it might not be, I don't know. There's a really strange case in Pennsylvania that has about a church and a church secretary that went into a private email of the pastor, found some pictures or something, and so she sent those pictures to the rest of the members of the congregation. And the church council, this is a Baptist church, I think, the church council fired the minister, and the minister sued in secular court for breach of privacy, or something like that, and won because she had invaded his personal email account, not his church email account, and then had published that information and should not have. So that, so the question is, would that be considered illegal in this area? Probably, maybe.
Ask the law.
That will be up to you all to kind of decide, is that going to be your outer limit?
I had to have an case in
Sorry.
saying,
Oh.
it's definitely illegal in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
The judge allowed it in.
Oh, no. Mhm.
I was asked as, by another state court who had a case coming up where the couple had a joint email account.
Mhm.
Yeah, one email account, and one spouse was having an affair, and the other spouse legally, they were sharing.
That just
their
sounds
account.
stupid, right? Woo.
Yeah, so, that was not illegally obtained.
I want to be caught. I want
Yeah, right? Okay.
The other was that we have for our presbytery a computer usage policy that on computers provided by the presbytery, it states explicitly, you have no expectation of privacy. There are certain people, there are only certain people who are allowed, namely our general presbyter and our computer technology person. But if one of those people have the right to go on the computer,
So, and there might be other facts and circumstances like that that come into play. What you would do if this came up at trial, if you had one of the parties saying one thing and another party saying another, you would recess, you would deliberate among yourselves and decide by majority vote. And then you come back and let them know whether you're going to bring that in or not bring it in.
And during the recess, you could call for a legal opinion.
Well, yeah. So that's an outside, really outside situation. You probably aren't gonna to need to know that, but yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that the judicial committee is both the prosecutor as well as the judge?
No.
No, the prosecuting committee is the one doing the prosecuting. They were originally the investigating committee. Now they're prosecuting.
That's why you have to either separate yourself between the two. I mean, in other words, what I'm hearing is that the committee is going to be the final judge of whatever that happens, right?
The commission, your permanent judicial commission, the commission that you're on,
Right.
is going to be the final
So
judge.
They're the judge.
Right, and there's a group of you, right.
Right, and in that group, the few are then selected to be the prosecutor.
No, that's a different committee. That's the investigating committee that was appointed and is now prosecuting it. So it's a different, they're not part of you all. No, yeah, they're separate.
I thought it was the same group.
No, they're separate from you. But that's good, I'm glad you asked that question then to clarify it. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
a different
that
group.
The commission is the judge.
Yeah, right. You all are on the commissions. So
Okay,
you're,
during the trial, so I'm.
right, you're all being the neutral folks.
So here the discussion is going, all of a sudden saying, time out, we gotta go talk.
Right,
And then we talk, and then you come right back. in
correct.
and-
Yes.
Okay.
And it's even a little bit more than that. I didn't say this because I didn't really talk a lot about trial procedure, because you don't really need to get in the details right now. If you ever have a case in front of you, we can run through trial procedure. But the one thing is that all the members of the PJC who are going to be at the trial and going to be deliberating have to be there and throughout the entire trial. So even if you have to go to the bathroom, you'll need to ask your moderator to recess the trial so that you can get up and take a break. If you got up and took a break, you would not be able to return and participate in the deliberations. So,
Aren't the trials recorded or something?
yeah, they are recorded, yes. So apparently down the hall here is the Pennsylvania Civil Trial Recording Group, or whatever. Yes, under our system, we ask that the trials, or we require that the trials be recorded so that if they are appealed by either of the parties, if one of the parties wants an accurate transcription, that is available. They can pay for that transcription, but that would be available. Because of the electronic recordings anymore, it's up to you all whether to do a good electronic recording that could be accurately transcribed or to have a court reporter there that can also be transcribed. I mean, it used to be 10 or 12 years ago you couldn't get an accurate electronic recording, but you pretty much can now. So it's up to you all how that is recorded, as long as it can be accurately transcribed. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Where are those files stored?
Which files?
The ones, are they, the minutes that are transcribed from the meeting, and how do they keep from not getting into the wrong hands?
Yeah, right. So your state clerk keeps all of those. You all get to gather them all at the trial, make sure they're all organized. When you all finish your process, you will give them to your state clerk. Your state clerk is required to keep them for 2 years, I think. 3 years, thank you. I'm not all that good with the time frames either, with the time frames. There are some folks will keep them for longer than that 3 years. We send all of ours at the General Assembly level to the Historical Society, and the only ones who have access to it are myself as the Assistant State Clerk or the State Clerk who's sitting. So we're the only ones that can call them back and open them. So you all can do that too. You could send them to the Historical Society and then have your State Clerk as the only one who would have access to recall it.
And that was Wayne's policy? Wayne, what are you doing? Are you sending them to the Historical Society?
We
or
don't
are you-
have any since Wayne's been here.
Yeah, so I don't know what y'all have done in the past ones, yeah. Okie dokie. Okay, let's assume that you refuse to accept that evidence, but you do accept the aggrieved spouse as a witness. How will you evaluate his testimony? Carefully, I hear. Why? Might have an axe to grind. He might be telling you about the stuff that you refuse to accept in, right? So there's going to be, yeah. He can certainly testify. You, again, that is where the discretion of the Permanent Judicial Commission that is hearing this testimony, that's what you get to do. You get to evaluate the people that are giving you the testimony. You evaluate how truthful they are, what their background, what their relationship is. Are they too angry so that you're not sure that they'd be truthful? Are they not, maybe have direct information that they can provide or indirect information. We absolutely allow hearsay, so it doesn't matter if it's circumstantial. You might have, for some reason, one of the parties wants to bring in somebody to testify that Pastor Smith is the best person that they've ever met. Okay, you know, how will you take that to whether or not Pastor Smith did this, you know, action, whatever. You know, so there's all kinds of, right, right, exactly. You get to judge the witness. Okay. The accused has told her congregation about the charges, and there are 50 people from her congregation there as support. But the witness will only testify if no one is there that doesn't have to be there. What do you do?
And you said that you could decide to make it closed
Yeah.
session?
Right.
Would that be the opportunity for the
Yeah.
PJC to do that?
Right. You can certainly close it. The moderator doesn't get to make that decision on their own. This is a 2/3 vote by the PJC. This is the only time that you need a 2/3 vote other than the actual decision in a disciplinary case or the acceptance of an AFR agreement. So all other decisions you make by majority vote. This is the only one you can close it by 2/3 vote, and you have to have a reason. So the reason may be in order to facilitate this testimony.
So if you start with an open case and you close it for that particular witness?
Yeah. The question was, if you start with an open case, can you close it for a particular witness? Yes, you can. You can also close to some people, not all people. The only person you can't close to, of course, are the parties, right? They have to be there. I've seen some presbyteries that have cases that are a lot of interest to folks that may not actually be members of congregations within your presbytery, and I've seen some presbyteries that will close it to only people who are members of our congregations or of this presbytery, so you don't have lots of national folks in it. That was especially during the cases that had to do with ordination issues. Media, yeah. I think you would have to have a reason.
You don't like you.
I don't know if that's sufficient or not. That's a good question. Okay. The investigating committee has informed the Committee on Ministry, COM, that old acronym, of the charges, and the Committee on Ministry, along with the session of her congregation, has placed the accused on administrative leave. Her defense counsel has filed a motion to dismiss, alleging she has been falsely placed on administrative leave, and asked for monetary damages from the presbytery if she is found not guilty. What do you do with the motion?
The U is
The PJC, right. You're on the PJC. It's a disciplinary case, and they're asking to dismiss the disciplinary case. Yeah.
If we made the decision and we feel good about it, we don't dismiss.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Or does the decision have to do with the monetary? Are there two pieces to that decision?
Absolutely.
yeah. So, really what she's challenging is the council action, right? And she's wanting it to affect her disciplinary case, which really goes to her own action, right? Did she do it? And is she repentant? And what is the appropriate censure? So this doesn't go to her own action. If she wanted to, she could file a remedial complaint against the presbytery. And she might have a case, even though she wouldn't be able to get the monetary damages. But she might have a case that the presbytery has not placed her on administrative leave correctly. But it really doesn't go to, did she do it, right?
And wouldn't the case for monetary damages have to be filed in a secular court, because there's no.
Yeah, we wouldn't have any way, even a remedial complaint, right? Yeah, right. Okay, the Permanent Judicial Commission, by a 2/3 vote, sustained 2 of the 3 charges beyond a reasonable doubt. The accused would like to put forward evidence that she has been in marital counseling and in spiritual counseling since the alleged affair, and she is repentant and rehabilitated. But you are running out of time because 2 members of the PJC had planes to catch in 1 hour. what do you do? They're not gonna make it anyway, she says. What do you do about that? You've got timing going,
I hope that you're on the flight.
Recess and reschedule.
recess and reschedule, sure, exactly, you can certainly do that. So we have some odd things. We have an authoritative interpretation that said a presbytery that had a disciplinary case that started at 8 in the morning and went to almost midnight was too long. They were too tired by the end, and that just, it was too much. And so even, they found the person guilty, and the person appealed, and they appealed on the fact that this was just too long and they didn't know what they were doing. And the GAPJC said, yeah, we agree, it's too long, but it's not gonna overturn your finding of guilt, you know, it was not, it didn't affect your finding of guilt, but we do agree it's too long. So it's perfectly fine if you have a case, you think it's only gonna go 6 hours, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of it and you find it's gonna take longer, you can reschedule for another day. You wanna try to do it as soon as possible, the next day if possible, the you know, in consecutive. If you can't, you're gonna wanna do it as quickly as possible. In this situation, you've already finished the case. You have found someone guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and so the question is that censure hearing that I was talking about. So it's perfectly okay to reschedule that censure hearing for the next weekend or 2 weekends from then. Probably would not be appropriate to reschedule for 6 months from now, right? But shortly after that, if you needed to, I think that would be appropriate. Again, the assembly said if they're asking for it, you should go ahead and do a censure hearing. It's not required that you do a censure hearing. It's not a requirement. But if they ask for it, you should go ahead. That's the language they use.
In this day of things like Skype, can some of the members of the PJC be present electronically?
Great question. Can some of the members of the PJC be present electronically? I would say no, not for the trial or for the censure hearing. If you were having some questions leading up to the trial that had to do with procedural issues, you probably could do those electronically. So for instance, most PJCs will empower their moderator and clerk to make procedural decisions prior to the trial, but if for some reason your moderator and clerk did not feel comfortable making a particular decision, asked for input from the rest of the PJC members, you could probably do that electronically. Because anything you do pre-trial, you will put on the record at the beginning of the trial, and either the parties would have opportunity to challenge that, and you would have a hearing, and you would decide, deliberate face-to-face. But in the actual trial, probably not. That being said, for those of you who are on the Synod PJC, the General Assembly Permanent Judicial Commission has allowed appeals to be done electronically. They themselves have to be together face-to-face in their deliberations, but they have allowed the parties to Skype in electronically on appeals. So I think that would be fine for the Synod PJC to do so also. Let's start in the back there, yeah.
I would assume a lot of these cases do involve when you get into the second phase, and that the parties are saying they've done marital counseling and spiritual counseling, and they're repentant and rehabilitated. That question of whether they're rehabilitated is very important. Do they normally would you require them to bring in their counselors or have a letter? Would a
You
letter
might,
be
yeah.
sufficient?
You might, yeah, I mean, again, that would go to, do you trust them just saying I'm rehabilitated, or have they brought in somebody that they would like to bring in as an expert witness that has been working with them on this, you know? So, and that would go to the weight of, you know, what they're saying. The censure hearing can also work against someone, because that's the time at which, you know, there's a five-year statute of limitations, but the prosecuting committee might say, well, 20 years ago they stole money, 15 years ago they stole money, 10 years ago they stole money. This is the time at which that repetitive behavior can come in. You know, so we're not really sure that they're going to stop this behavior. That wouldn't be appropriate in the trial on the merits about the original embezzlement. But yeah, okay, sorry, Janie.
This question on this one, if you run out of time after you decision, but before you figured out what the, censure is, do you inform the, the accused of the convictions, or do you wait until you've done the whole thing before you tell them?
You would have to inform the person in order to give them an opportunity to prepare for a censure hearing. Yeah, that was a good question, though. I mean, you would have to kind of come up with that at the time and say, okay, we think this is important to go ahead and inform the person so that they can create or prepare for a censure hearing that we would like to have. And you can have the censure hearing immediately, or you can, again, put it off to a reasonable time if you feel like they need more time to prepare. Yeah. Okay, I think you all are ready. You're doing good. You're doing great. You know where to go if you have any questions. You know how to find some of the answers. You've got a good overall. I think you all have done really well. You can tell by your responses to this. So thank you. And for those of you on the Synod PJC, if you don't mind sticking around, we do have a little bit more that we need to talk to the Synod folks with, but the Presbytery folks don't need to stick around. Mm-hmm.
Is anybody disappointed because you're getting that early?
Yeah, they're upset they're back for the snacks again.
I was just gonna say, go down and have some snacks.
You want to come back in 10 minutes for the Synod?
Yeah, Lori, we say thank you to you.
Sure.